Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're continuing with the next part of this epic time chamber series. My name is Ash. Please, for me, drop a like, join the Patreon, and subscribe to the page. Also, leave your comments down below. With that, let's begin.
Cross my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
Omni Gogeta moved first. A sharp pivot, his aura compressed in an instant, distorting the very fabric of space around him. With a single burst of power, he was upon Raiko, moving faster than the speed of thought. His fist rocketed forward, the sheer force behind it causing the void itself to ripple. Raiko barely tilted his head, the punch slicing past his cheek by a hair's breadth. The air pressure alone sent cracks surging through the space behind him. But before Gogeta could readjust, Raiko's elbow snapped backward. A razor-sharp strike aimed directly at Gogeta's jaw. Gogeta ducked, twisting fluidly, his reflexes honed beyond perfection. He drove his knee upward in retaliation, the attack carrying enough force to shatter a planet. Raiko blocked with a forearm, but the impact echoed with a sharp crack, a force so immense it sent tremors through the void. Energy flared from the point of contact, sending waves of cosmic destruction in all directions. For a moment, it seemed as if they were evenly matched, but then the battle became a blur. Gogeta unleashed a relentless barrage of punches, each one faster than light itself. His fists tore through the very atmosphere, creating afterimages that trailed behind him like echoes of destruction. What followed was an eruption of energy, his strikes generating a storm of fist-like energy constructs, each one carrying the weight of Omni Hakai energy. Raiko, however, stood firm. His movements were almost too calm, as if reading Gogeta's rhythm like an open book. Each attack was met with an effortless parry, his fingers tracing the flow of energy before it even arrived. It was as if he saw the future itself, but Gogeta was not done. Feint left, spin, hook the leg. Raiko's stance faltered for just a fraction of a second. That was all Gogeta needed. His palms surged with violet destruction flames, raw power condensing at his fingertips. Hakai burst! The blast erupted forward, a concentrated beam of destruction energy surging toward Raiko at point-blank range. Raiko twisted midair, narrowly avoiding the core of the attack. The beam grazed his shoulder, instantly disintegrating a portion of his armor. Yet before the damage could expand, he was gone. Gogeta's eyes widened. He felt it before he saw it. Raiko's presence blinked in above him, his heel already descending at full speed. With no time to evade, Gogeta crossed his arms, blocked, and the sheer force of the impact sent a colossal shockwave roaring through the void. The battlefield cratered beneath them, reality itself bending from the overwhelming power behind the strike. This was not a simple exchange of blows. Every block, every counter, carried the weight of a black hole, and every impact sent shock waves strong enough to extinguish stars. Light itself flickered out in their wake. But Raiko didn't let up. He was relentless, chaining his attack into a rapid mid-air spin. His strikes came in brutal arcs. Left hook, right jab, knee strike. Each one blindingly fast, each one carrying more power than the last. Gogeta grunted as he slid backward, his boots carving trenches into the shattered ground beneath them. Chi, he's fast! Raiko's eyes glowed for an instant. His hand snapped outward, two fingers illuminated with a faint celestial energy. Shinsoku! A whisper in the void. Then he vanished. His speed doubled. Gogeta barely had time to react. The next moment, Raiko's palm slammed into his chest, the impact so intense it sent shockwaves through his very core. The force bent his ribs inward, causing a momentary lapse in his breathing. But Gogeta refused to crumble. Using the momentum of the hit, he twisted mid-air, flipping backward as he charged a compressed energy blast in his palm. The air around it crackled violently, distorting space itself. Point blank, he fired. Raiko flickered to the side, dodging by mere inches, the attack detonating behind him with the force of a dying supernova. For the first time in this battle, Gogeta's voice carried a hint of frustration. Even in our fusion, we still aren't getting the upper hand. Just how strong do we need to become? And in that moment, it became clear Raiko was beyond anything they had ever faced. Frustration creeping in. Omni Gogeta clenched his fists, his cosmic energy pulsating like a raging storm. His golden white aura crackled violently, distorting the void around him. If Zeno's guard was this powerful, even in their strongest fusion, then it meant only one thing. Zeno was holding back the last time they fought. That realization sent a cold shiver down his spine. Across the battlefield, a different storm was brewing. Gohan and the Grand Priest circled one another, the tension between them thick enough to bend reality itself. The winds howled around them, chaotic and untamed. The battlefield trembled under their sheer presence. The Grand Priest's flowing robes fluttered wildly, his once serene and untouchable aura now fluctuating with heavy breaths. He was exhausted, and Gohan could tell. Gohan cracked his knuckles, sparks of energy licking off him in jagged bursts. His fusion form pulsed with power, his stance unshaken, his confidence absolute. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're much slower now, old man." His tone was casual, almost mocking. Who would have thought the mighty Grand Priest isn't so mighty after all? The Grand Priest's gaze sharpened, a flash of irritation breaking through his usually unreadable expression. "Try. It seems that because of that little fusion, you've grown arrogant." His voice was controlled, but laced with disdain. "Not long ago, it took all 4 of you monkeys at full power just to keep up with me. Now, just because you landed a few hits, you think you've surpassed me?" He straightened his posture, a deadly calm settling over him. "No matter, I'll be dealing with you now." Then he moved. A blinding burst of speed, his fist aiming low for Gohan's gut. Gohan, however, was ready. Their fists collided. Kai erupted outward, creating a cataclysmic shockwave. The force shattered the ground beneath them, the battlefield itself splitting apart under the weight of their power. But Gohan pushed through, his raw strength overpowering the priest's momentum. He lunged forward, slamming his forehead into the Grand Priest's nose. A sickening crack echoed across the battlefield. The priest reeled backward, stunned. Gohan wasted no time, dropping low, spinning. His legs swept the priest's feet out from under him. The moment the priest's body left the ground, Gohan's hands twisted together, energy building instantly. His voice boomed across the battlefield. "Ultimate Kamehameha!" A titanic beam of energy erupted from his palms, the sheer brightness turning everything white hot. The attack tore through the air, aimed directly at the Grand Priest. The Grand Priest's palm shot out, his fingers twitching as he called upon his most powerful ability. "Limitless!" But nothing happened. His eyes widened in horror. He was too weak. His energy reserves were nearly drained, and the limitless ability required a vast amount of power to activate. There was no time to react. The ultimate Kamehameha struck him point blank, the force so overwhelming it sent shockwaves through multiple dimensions. The explosion was instantaneous. The battlefield was engulfed in pure annihilation. The smoke cleared. The Grand Priest stood, floating midair. But something was wrong. His body was intact, his divine energy still flickering around him, but his head was missing. For a moment, everything was eerily silent. Then, slowly, his head began to regenerate, shimmering back into existence as if reconstructing pixel by pixel. Even without facial features, the rage radiating from him was unmistakable. But something else became painfully clear. Gohan's eyes narrowed, his mind piecing it together. The longer the Grand Priest fought, the weaker he became. His regeneration, it wasn't infinite. It was burning through something. Mana. The Saiyan warriors exchanged glances, realization dawning on them. So that's it. They weren't just fighting to overpower him. They were draining him. The more damage they inflicted, the more his regeneration kicked in. And the more he regenerated, the more mana he lost. And if his mana well ran dry, he would no longer be able to regenerate at all. Meaning, if they erased him completely, down to the last atom, he would stay dead. The Grand Priest's fingers curled inward. His energy surged once more, but this time it felt different. His voice cut through the silence, cold and unwavering. Time remnant, split edge, and just like that, reality shattered. The void trembled as 2 glowing energy blades materialized in the Grand Priest's hands. They pulsed with raw mana, crackling as if barely contained. Without hesitation, he dashed forward. His movement was near instant, his blades cutting through space itself. He slashed in a blinding X pattern, a technique designed to carve through even the toughest defenses. Gohan's instincts kicked in. He ducked, the first blade sliced just inches above his head. But the second? Gohan thrust out his palm, catching it mid-strike. Sizzling energy burned against his skin, his body trembling under the sheer power behind it. But Brohan wasn't just defending, he was stealing. His key threads, an ability inherited from their fusion, latched onto the blade, siphoning the priest's own energy and redirecting it into his fist. In an instant, Brohan's entire arm flared with the same energy, forging it into a makeshift hammer. He swung. The empowered fist slammed into the Grand Priest's temple with a deafening crack. The impact sent the priest spiraling, his body flipping end over end as he instinctively reached out, gripping the air itself to slow his tumble. But Brohan was already in motion, a blitz, a perfectly orchestrated onslaught. Elbows, knees, rapid-fire punches. Each blow landed heavy, every hit a thunderclap against the Grand Priest's body. The once untouchable celestial being was now nothing more than a punching bag, his form launching in one direction with every strike. But before his body could finish flying away, Brohan was already there. Another strike, another explosion of force. The Grand Priest's body was battered across the battlefield, never getting a moment to recover. His blood stained the air, his divine glow flickering, his defenses crumbling. For the first time in his eternal existence, he was being dominated. The Grand Priest gritted his teeth. His pride, his absolute authority over battle, was being shattered. His hand shot outward. A massive pulse of raw mana detonated between them. A shockwave so immense, it forced Brohan backward, tearing apart the very fabric of space. The Grand Priest hovered mid-air, blood trailing down his cheek, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His expression twisted, not in fear, but in absolute burning rage. How could I be losing to a weakling like you? His voice seethed with disbelief. If only I was at full strength, I would have made quick work of you. Brohan, hovering a few feet away, exhaled sharply, his chest rising and falling. That last attack took effort, but his lips curled into a wild grin. That's the problem, isn't it? He taunted, wiping his chin. You underestimated us Saiyan from the start. The moment you thought this would be easy, you lost. The Grand Priest's fingers twitched. He knew. Brohan wasn't just fighting to win. He was dismantling him. And then, Brohan's hands pulled apart. Thin, glowing Kai threads sparked to life, dancing between his fingers like a deadly web. The Grand Priest's eyes narrowed in sudden realization. He knew that technique. Brohan flung his hands forward. Ki thread! Heartbinder! The luminous threads shot out, weaving a net of pure energy. The Grand Priest reacted instantly. He tried to teleport, to phase through reality itself. But he was too slow. His energy was already too depleted. The threads wrapped around his chest, embedding themselves into his core. And then, a sharp, invisible force gripped his heart. His eyes widened in pure, unfiltered rage. You dare! He recognized this power. From the moment he had fought Gohan, he had been cautious of his ki-based abilities. He knew what they could do, and now they had figured it out. A realization burned through his mind. They've discovered how my immortality works. It all made sense now. From the moment Brohan fused, all of their attacks had been ki-based, not just to damage him, but to force him to use his regeneration. They were draining him. They knew that his regeneration, his very immortality, depended on mana. And once that mana ran out, he would no longer be able to heal. They had been forcing him to burn through his reserves. The Saiyan weren't fighting to overpower him. They were fighting to erase him. Brohan's grip tightened. The ki threads pulsed, constricting around the Grand Priest's heart. A surge of energy flared wildly inside the net. His mana was becoming unstable, spiraling out of control. The Grand Priest roared, his divine form flickering violently between existence and instability. His regeneration, once instantaneous and absolute, was now a double-edged sword. Each time his body healed, he lost more mana. Each second he held back his healing, Brohan's ki thread siphoned more of his life force. He was trapped. Brohan's grip tightened, his fused body radiating with overwhelming presence. The glowing Kai threads in his grasp pulsed in sync with the Grand Priest's failing heartbeat. I'm ripping the energy right out of you. His voice was steady, filled with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a dismantling, and the Grand Priest knew it. Something had changed in Brohan. Before the fusion, Gohan's ki manipulation was already unparalleled, but now That control had evolved into something greater. His perception of energy had deepened beyond comprehension. He had once believed that ki, mana, and reishi were distinct forces, separate by nature, functioning by their own rules. But mid-battle, he saw the truth. They were all connected. The moment he tapped into the Grand Priest's mana, the missing piece fell into place. Energy, in all its forms, was simply frequency. Each type, whether it be kai, mana, or reishi, resonated at different vibrational patterns, yet they all existed on the same fundamental spectrum. This understanding wasn't intellectual. It was intuitive, as if the knowledge had been waiting inside him all along, locked away until now. Ki, the life force of all living beings, bound to willpower and raw vitality. Mana, the ethereal force of creation, drawn from the cosmos, emotion, and higher dimensions. Reishi, the potential energy woven into the balance of the universe itself. He had mastered Kai long ago, but he had never considered that the same principles applied to all forms of energy. Now, in this moment, he understood, and because he understood, he could manipulate it. The Kai threads pulsed, growing brighter as they sank deeper into the Grand Priest's very core. The once untouchable deity howled, his fingers clawing at the threads, constricting around his body. His divine energy was being ripped away, and he couldn't stop it. His mana reserves were draining too fast. His body struggled to regenerate, the usual seamless restoration now lagging, faltering, falling behind. Because every time he healed, it cost him more mana, and every bit of mana spent brought him closer to death. His divine form flickered again, his body momentarily glitching in and out of existence. Panic set in. For the first time in his existence, the Grand Priest felt something he never thought possible: fear. His fingers curled, desperation fueling his next move. His voice was a snarl, filled with rage and disbelief. "You dare!" His mind raced. He had been cautious ever since he first faced Gohan. He knew that the Saiyan's ki techniques were unnatural, their potential unpredictable, and now they had figured it out. They knew how his immortality worked. The realization hit him like a death sentence. From the moment Brohan was formed, every attack they had used was designed to drain him. Every exchange was meant to burn his energy faster, forcing him to waste his mana on healing. And now he was running out. Brohan yanked the ki threads hard. The Grand Priest convulsed, his mana flaring wildly, spiraling out of control inside the glowing net. His own energy was betraying him, surging against his will, slipping through his grasp like sand through broken fingers. His healing was slowing, his body was deteriorating, and for the first time in his eternal existence, he was on the brink of collapse. Back above, Omni Gogeta sidestepped a lightning-fast jab from Raiko, his instincts guiding him with pinpoint precision. But Raiko was already moving. His knee drove into Gogeta's ribs, detonating an impact that sent shockwaves roaring outward. Boom! The force sent Gogeta rocketing downward, his body slamming into the surface of Jupiter. The entire planet trembled under the collision, its core fracturing. It was on the verge of destruction. From the moment this battle began, two planets had already been annihilated: Venus and Neptune, reduced to nothing but cosmic dust. Now, Jupiter teetered on the edge of oblivion, and if this fight continued unchecked, every planet in Xeno's domain would be caught in the crossfire. Omni Gogeta coughed up blood, his aura flickering violently. His body throbbed with pain, but his expression only twisted into a grin. To think that even in this fusion, Omni Gogeta isn't enough to stop you, he chuckled, wiping the blood from his lips. All right, time to push it. His aura twisted, warping like a storm of silver flames, raging with overwhelming power. Then he released the cap. Before now, he had been holding back, not because he wanted to, but out of necessity. Gogeta's fused form was already pushing the boundaries of existence itself, but he had two energy siphoning techniques: dark siphoning and ultra ego. Vegeta, before the fusion, could only use one at a time. His body couldn't handle the combined energy consumption without risking total self-destruction. But this was different. This wasn't Vegeta. This was Omni Gogeta, and he believed this new body could handle the unimaginable power. Both dark siphoning and ultra ego activated simultaneously. Every strike Raiko landed triggered his ultra ego, causing Gogeta's power to skyrocket. But that wasn't all. Every time Raiko attacked, his dark siphoning also kicked in, siphoning off Raiko's own God Ki. feeding it directly into Gogeta's reserves. He was growing stronger at an alarming rate. At that moment, he took it even further. His voice thundered across the battlefield. Ultra Instinct! Full synchronization! A surge of divine radiance erupted around him, his body moving with absolute precision. Raiko's next strike shot forward, faster than light, but it missed. By mere millimeters, the attack slid past Gogeta's cheek. His movements had changed. He was now operating at full Ultra Instinct, his body shifting in perfect fluid harmony. They vanished. Then, they reappeared mid-air, clashing once more, fist to fist, blow for blow. Raiko's Godspeed against Primordial Gogeta. Every movement was calculated, precise, and brutal. The air screamed with each impact, the very fabric of reality warping as their attacks collided with enough force to obliterate entire galaxies. But then, Gogeta surged ahead. His strength had increased exponentially. His fists became blurs, strikes too fast to be perceived. 1, 10, 50. In less than a second, 50 consecutive punches landed. Raiko's body rocketed downward, spiraling through the air at unimaginable speeds. Crack! The moment he made contact with the planet, the sheer impact split Jupiter in half, the molten core rupturing, sending an explosion of cosmic fire into the void. Despite the catastrophic blow, Raiko refused to be overwhelmed. Mid-fall, he moved. His fingers latched onto the two severed halves of Jupiter, and with a mighty heave, he pulled them back together. The sheer force of his grip sent shockwaves across space, the gravitational field restabilizing, sealing the planet back into a single mass. Raiko landed softly, his crimson eyes narrowing as he looked up at Gogeta. For the first time, he acknowledged the fusion's incredible power. He exhaled slowly, understanding that if this fight dragged on, the scales would tip further and further against him. Gogeta was a monster, and he was only getting stronger. But Raiko smirked, because he knew something Gogeta didn't. Every fusion had a limit. Whether it was a time limit or a power threshold, it was a temporary advantage. And for a fusion this powerful, the time limit had to be incredibly short. 15 minutes. That was his guess. That was his window. Fine. Raiko's stance shifted, his muscles relaxing. It was time. Time to show what true power looked like. A power not of this world. A power that had been imitated by others in different timelines, different realms. But he was the originator. His voice rang through the battlefield. Third gate, gate of life, open. Raiko's aura exploded outward, a raging green inferno of raw force. His body surged with a power unlike anything seen before, his cells burning with pure vitality. This was only the third of 8 gates. And already, space itself trembled. Raiko grinned, his eyes locked onto Gogeta. Let's dance. The battlefield groaned under the weight of its warriors. These were no ordinary combatants. These were literal gods. The very fabric of reality twisted and warped under their overwhelming power. The sky, if it could still be called that, was fractured. Veins of raw cosmic energy bleeding into the void. The battle had grown so intense that entire galaxies in the distance flickered, destabilized by the sheer force radiating from their planet-sized battlefield. Raiko stood tall, his expression unchanged, yet his body told another story. His pristine armor, once untouchable, was cracked along the shoulder, a thin trail of darkened blood running down his arm. For the first time in this battle, Primordial Omni Gogeta had drawn blood. Gogeta flexed his fingers, feeling the crackling weight of his own fusion. His body burned hot, yet remained stable, a perfect balance of raw destruction and divine instinct. Raiko's lips barely twitched. Not bad. For a fusion, there was no admiration in his voice, only disdain. He hated fusion. To him, it was borrowed power, a shortcut. A warrior's strength should be his own. Gogeta didn't respond. He moved. In an instant, space itself buckled. Omni Gogeta vanished, a blur of motion too fast for even divine eyes to track. But this time, Raiko was ready. His pupils disappeared. His skin flushed a deep crimson, veins bulging with raw, unrestricted power. His speed doubled. His strength doubled. Boom! Raiko's foot lashed out midair. Gogeta's forearm snapped up, blocking. A shockwave detonated outward, disintegrating a nearby moon, but neither of them flinched. Gogeta twisted, his leg sweeping upward. Raiko ducked, his palm surging forward, aiming for Gogeta's exposed ribs. But Gogeta's elbow crashed downward, intercepting the strike mid-arc, and before Raiko could reset. Crack! Gogeta's knee slammed into Raiko's chest, shattering his armor even further. Fragments of divine material spiraled into the void, yet Raiko didn't flinch. His hand snapped out, grabbing Gogeta's leg with an unbreakable grip. And then, with sheer brute force, Raiko swung him in a brutal arc, slamming him through an entire floating mountain range. Boom! The planet lurched off its axis, an entire continent vaporizing on impact. Omni Gogeta hit the ground so hard that cracks spread across the planet's crust, magma erupting in pillars of fire. His body tensed in pain, blood spitting from his lips. That hurt. Even with his insane durability, even with his primordial fusion form, the damage was undeniable. But he was still growing stronger. Ultra Ego fed off pain, amplifying his physical might. Dark Siphoning absorbed divine energy, replenishing his stamina and boosting his energy reserves. He wasn't just keeping up, he was adapting, evolving, and as of now, his body had not yet reached its limit. Alright, Omni Gogeta grinned, rolling his shoulders. You hit hard. Raiko hovered overhead, his aura flaring brighter, wild, and untamed. You haven't seen anything yet. Then, he attacked. Raiko exploded forward, his fists becoming blurs of motion, each strike punctuated by sonic booms that shook the entire planet. Each blow had the force to shift the tectonic plates beneath them. And that's it for today's episode, guys. If you watched to the end, then that could be an indication that you enjoy the series. So please leave a like on the video. Thank you and take care.